There are lessons that life will never teach you while you are still holding on. They do not arrive through another conversation, another explanation, or another chance given to someone who has already shown you what they are willing to do with your heart. They come only when you become strong enough to step away from what is hurting you, even when a part of you still loves it. Walking away is rarely a clean, fearless decision. Sometimes you leave with trembling hands. You leave while questioning yourself. You leave carrying memories that still feel warm, promises that once sounded sincere, and hope that has not completely died. You may walk away and still look back. You may miss the person and still know that returning would cost you too much. You may grieve the relationship while also recognizing that remaining inside it was slowly teaching you to abandon yourself. That is the truth few people speak about. Sometimes the hardest person to leave is not the one you stopped loving. It is the one you still love but can no longer survive beside. For a long time, you may have believed that strength meant staying. You told yourself that loyal people do not give up. Mature people communicate. Compassionate people forgive. Loving people remain patient. So you kept extending understanding to someone who rarely extended the same understanding to you. You made room for their wounds, their confusion, their fear, and their unfinished healing. You listened to the stories behind their behavior. You considered their childhood, their past disappointments, and the pain they never learned how to express. But while you were studying the reasons they hurt you, you may have forgotten to ask what their behavior was doing to you. Understanding why someone causes harm does not make the harm harmless. Compassion is beautiful, but it becomes dangerous when it is used to silence your own pain. Loyalty is honorable, but it becomes self-betrayal when you must repeatedly abandon your dignity to prove it. There comes a moment when staying is no longer evidence of love. It becomes evidence that you have learned to tolerate what your spirit has been begging you to confront. Perhaps you stayed because you believed the right words would finally reach them. You thought that if you explained your pain clearly enough, calmly enough, or gently enough, they would understand. You searched for better language. You softened your tone. You waited for the right moment. You repeated yourself until your own feelings began to sound like accusations in your ears. But the problem was not always that they did not understand. Sometimes they understood perfectly. They simply knew that your love would keep absorbing the consequences. That realization changes something inside a woman. It teaches her that communication cannot repair what accountability refuses to acknowledge. No perfect sentence can create empathy in someone who benefits from misunderstanding her. No amount of patience can build a healthy relationship with someone who treats patience as permission. Walking away begins when you stop asking, "How can I make them understand?" and start asking, "Why must I continue proving that my pain is real?" This question is uncomfortable because it turns your attention away from them and returns it to you. It asks you to notice how long you have been waiting. How many times have you accepted an apology that was not followed by change? How many promises have you preserved long after their behavior contradicted them? How many nights have you blamed yourself for reacting to something that should never have become normal? How many parts of your personality have you reduced so that the relationship could continue without demanding anything from the other person? Maybe you became quieter. Maybe you stopped asking questions. Maybe you learned to hide your disappointment. Maybe you trained yourself to celebrate the smallest effort because expecting consistency always ended in heartbreak. Slowly, you may have confused emotional survival with peace. But peace is not the absence of an argument when silence is costing you your voice. Peace is not keeping someone comfortable while your own heart remains unsettled. Peace is not accepting less and calling it maturity. Real peace does not require you to disappear. There is a lesson waiting on the other side of walking away. You were never asking for too much simply because the wrong person was unwilling to give it. You were not too sensitive for wanting honesty. You were not demanding for wanting consistency. You were not difficult for expecting respect. You were not selfish for needing reciprocity. You may have been asking someone for a kind of love they were either unable or unwilling to offer. And instead of accepting that truth, you turn their limitation into a judgment of your worth. That is what prolonged disappointment can do. It can make you believe that if you were more beautiful, more patient, less emotional, more successful, more agreeable, or easier to love, the relationship would become what you had hoped it could be. But love should not require endless auditions. You should not have to perform emotional perfection to receive basic consideration. You should not have to become smaller to prevent someone from leaving. And you should not have to earn through suffering what should be freely present in a relationship built on mutual care. Walking away is not always the moment you stop loving another person. Sometimes it is the moment you finally stop using love as a reason to betray yourself. This does not mean you suddenly feel powerful. In the beginning, walking away may feel like failure. You may wonder whether you should have tried one more time. You may remember the best moments and question whether the painful ones were truly bad enough to justify leaving. The mind often edits the past when loneliness enters the room. It highlights the laughter and softens the disrespect. It replays the promises and forgets how often those promises were broken. It shows you who the person was during the beautiful moments while hiding who you became during the painful ones. When this happens, do not ask only whether you miss them. Ask whether you miss yourself when you were with them. Did you feel safe enough to be honest? Did your body feel calm in their presence? Could you express a need without fearing punishment, withdrawal, ridicule, or rejection? Did their words and actions allow you to trust them? Were you loved consistently, or were you kept emotionally attached through unpredictable moments of affection? Missing someone does not prove that they belong in your life. It proves that you formed an attachment. It proves that there were moments your heart valued. It proves that you are human. You are allowed to miss what was beautiful without returning to what was destructive. You are allowed to honor the memories without reopening the door. You are allowed to love someone from a distance that protects your peace. This is one of the first lessons that comes when you become strong enough to walk away. Love and access are not the same thing. You can care about someone and still deny them continued access to your emotions, your time, your body, and your future. You can forgive someone and still recognize that trust has been damaged. You can wish them healing without volunteering to be hurt while they search for it. Boundaries are not evidence that your heart has become cold. Sometimes, boundaries are the clearest evidence that your heart has finally become wise. The decision to leave may not bring immediate relief. There may be grief before freedom, There may be silence before clarity. There may be days when you feel lighter and nights when you question everything. But do not mistake the pain of withdrawal for proof that you made the wrong decision. You are not only separating from a person, you are separating from a pattern, an expectation, a familiar emotional rhythm, and a future you once imagined. Your heart must grieve all of these things. Give it permission. Let yourself mourn without turning grief into a reason to go back. Some endings hurt not because they are wrong, but because they are necessary. And perhaps this is where your deepest lesson begins. You did not walk away because you lacked love. You walked away because love without respect was no longer enough. You walked away because promises without change had become another form of delay. You walked away because you were tired of calling your endurance devotion. You walked away because somewhere beneath the fear, the grief, and the memories, a forgotten part of you finally whispered, I cannot keep losing myself just to keep someone else. Listen to that voice. It is not bitterness. It is not selfishness. It is the sound of your dignity returning. One of the reasons walking away feels so painful is that you are rarely leaving only a person. You are also leaving the future you imagined with them. You are releasing the conversations you believed you would one day have, the places you thought you would visit, the home you pictured, the promises you expected them to keep, and the version of the relationship you kept hoping would finally appear. Sometimes you are grieving something that never fully existed but felt completely real inside your heart. That grief can be difficult to explain. Other people may look at the relationship and ask why you are still hurting. They may remind you of the disrespect, the inconsistency, or the many times you were disappointed. They may believe that leaving should feel like liberation from the moment you close the door. But the heart does not heal according to logic alone. You can understand that someone was wrong for you and still grieve what you wanted the relationship to become. You can recognize that leaving was necessary and still feel devastated by the loss. Both truths can live inside you at the same time. You can be relieved and heartbroken. You can be certain and still feel afraid. You can know that returning would destroy your peace and still miss the familiarity of their presence. Healing does not require you to choose only one emotion. For a long time, hope may have been the thread keeping you connected. Every time something broke, hope convinced you that it could still be repaired. Every time they disappointed you, hope reminded you of their potential. Every time you considered leaving, hope presented you with one more possible future. Maybe they would finally understand. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe losing you temporarily would teach them how to value you permanently. Maybe your patience would eventually be rewarded. Hope can be beautiful, but hope without evidence can also become a prison. It can keep you emotionally committed to a possibility while reality continues to wound you. It can make you loyal to who someone might become instead of honest about who they repeatedly choose to be. Potential is not a relationship. A promise is not a pattern. A meaningful conversation is not lasting change. And love cannot survive forever on what might happen someday. At some point, you must stop measuring the relationship by its most beautiful moments and begin measuring it by its most consistent ones. Anyone can offer tenderness, when they are afraid of losing you. Anyone can make promises during an emotional conversation. Anyone can behave differently for a few days when consequences finally become visible. The question is not whether they are capable of being good to you occasionally. The question is whether respect, honesty, and care are present consistently enough for your heart to feel safe. Intermittent love creates powerful attachments because you never know when the warmth will return. One day, you feel chosen. The next, you feel invisible. One conversation gives you hope. The following silence leaves you questioning your worth. This unpredictability can make you cling more tightly, not because the relationship is healthy, but because your nervous system has become desperate for the next moment of relief. You may call it passion. You may call it deep connection. You may believe no one else has ever made you feel so intensely, but intensity is not always intimacy. Sometimes intensity is anxiety mixed with hope. Sometimes what feels like an extraordinary bond is the emotional exhaustion of never knowing where you stand. Healthy love may not keep you constantly guessing. It does not need to wound you in order to make reconciliation feel powerful. It does not repeatedly remove affection so that its return feels like a reward. The lesson that comes after walking away is that calm does not mean love is missing. Calm may be what love feels like when you are no longer fighting to secure it. At first, however, calm can feel empty. When you have become accustomed to emotional chaos, peace may seem unfamiliar. Your body may search for the next message, the next conflict, the next apology, or the next moment when everything suddenly feels beautiful again. Without that cycle, you may experience silence as loneliness. But silence is not always abandonment. Sometimes silence is the space in which you finally begin to hear yourself. For years, your mind may have been occupied by their behavior. What did they mean? Why did they change? Were they telling the truth? Would they call? Were you overreacting? How could you explain your feelings without pushing them away? When you leave, all the energy once devoted to understanding them slowly begins returning to you. This return can be uncomfortable because you must face questions you postponed while trying to save the relationship. Who are you without this struggle? What dreams did you neglect? Which friendships did you allow to fade? What needs did you dismiss? What parts of yourself became strangers because all your attention was directed toward keeping the relationship alive? These questions are not meant to shame you. They are invitations to come home. You did what you knew how to do at the time. You tried to protect something you believed was meaningful. You stayed because you loved, hoped, remembered, and wanted to believe that the pain would eventually lead somewhere beautiful. Do not insult your former self for having hope. She was not foolish simply because someone failed to honor what she offered. She was working with the information, emotional tools, and level of self-worth she possessed at that moment. But now you know more. And new awareness creates new responsibility. Once you see that a pattern is harming you, you cannot unsee it. You may temporarily ignore it. You may explain it away. You may return to the relationship and attempt to convince yourself that things are different. But the truth will continue speaking. It may speak through your anxiety. It may speak through the exhaustion in your body. It may speak through the way you rehearse every sentence before expressing a need. It may speak through the version of yourself you see in the mirror, the woman who is functioning, smiling, and showing up for everyone while privately wondering how she became so emotionally depleted. Walking away becomes possible when you decide to believe the pattern rather than the promise. This is not cruelty. It is clarity. You are not declaring that the other person has no goodness. Human beings are complicated. Someone can possess wonderful qualities and still be unhealthy for you. A person can have a wounded past and still be responsible for the wounds they create in the present. You do not need to turn them into a monster to justify protecting yourself. You only need to accept that whatever goodness existed between you was not enough to create the kind of relationship your life now requires. That acceptance may be more painful than anger. Anger gives you someone to blame. Acceptance asks you to release the fantasy that the past can still become a different future. Acceptance says, "This mattered to me, but it is no longer mine to carry forward." It says, "There was love here, but there was also harm." It says, "I can honor what was real without continuing what is no longer healthy." You may still have moments when you imagine them returning as the person you always needed them to be. In that fantasy, they understand everything. They apologize without excuses. They recognize your value. They take responsibility, change their behavior, and offer the security you spent years requesting. Be gentle with yourself when this fantasy appears. It is not necessarily a sign that you should return. It may be your heart attempting to create the closure reality never provided. But you must learn to separate emotional longing from wise direction. Longing says, "I want the pain to have a different ending." Wisdom says, "I cannot build my life around an ending someone has shown no ability to create." Sometimes closure is not a final conversation. Sometimes closure is recognizing that the pattern itself was the answer. Every ignored concern was an answer. Every broken promise was an answer. Every time you had to beg for what should have been freely given was an answer. The answer may not have been the one you wanted, but refusing to accept it only prolonged your suffering. Walking away teaches you to stop waiting for someone else to pronounce the relationship finished in a way that satisfies your heart. You are allowed to close a door because remaining inside the room is harming you. You are allowed to make a decision without receiving agreement from the person affected by your boundary. You are allowed to choose peace even when someone else calls your choice selfish, dramatic, unforgiving, or unfair. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may not celebrate your healing. Let them misunderstand. You have spent enough time trying to make your pain acceptable to people who were comfortable while you carried it. Now your work is different. Your work is to grieve honestly. Grieve the person. Grieve the dream. Grieve the years. Grieve the version of yourself who waited. Grieve the future that will not happen in the form you imagine. But as you grieve, remember this: losing an imagined future also creates space for a truthful one. The empty space before you is not only evidence of what ended, it is also evidence that something new can now begin. You may not see that new life yet. You may still be standing among the remains of what you hoped would last. But one day, you will understand that the future you were afraid to lose was keeping you from meeting the future that could finally hold you with honesty. For now, do not rush. Let the ending be an ending. Let the grief move through you without becoming your permanent home. You are not walking away with nothing. You are walking away with discernment. You are walking away with truth. You are walking away with a clearer understanding of what love must never again require you to sacrifice. And although your hands may feel empty, they are finally free. One of the most exhausting ways to remain attached to someone is to keep waiting for them to give you closure. You may have physically walked away, stopped calling, removed their number, and ended the relationship. Yet a part of your heart may still be standing at the same door, waiting for an explanation that makes everything understandable. You want to know why they did it. Why did they promise what they could not maintain? Why did they encourage your trust only to betray it? Why did they say they loved you while behaving as though your pain did not matter? Why did they allow you to invest your time, loyalty, and tenderness if they knew they were unwilling to meet you with the same sincerity? These questions are not unreasonable. When someone hurts you deeply, the mind naturally searches for meaning. It believes that if it can understand the wound, it can finally control the pain. It replays conversations, examines inconsistencies, and revisits memories that once seemed insignificant. You become an investigator of your own heartbreak. You look for the moment everything changed. You search for the warning sign you missed. You wonder whether there was a sentence you should have interpreted differently or a question you should have asked sooner. But sometimes the search for answers becomes another way of staying connected. Every question keeps the person psychologically present. Every imaginary conversation gives them another hour of your life. Every rehearsal of what you would say if they finally return keeps your healing dependent on an event that may never occur. You tell yourself that you only need one honest conversation. But what if honesty was exactly what they consistently refuse to offer? What if the person who created the confusion does not possess the emotional maturity required to resolve it? What if they know precisely what they did but are unwilling to face the version of themselves that accountability would reveal? Closure cannot always come from the person who caused the wound. Sometimes the same limitations that allowed them to hurt you are the limitations that prevent them from helping you heal. They may deny what happened. They may minimize it. They may change details to protect their image. They may blame your reaction rather than acknowledge their behavior. They may offer an apology that is designed to end the conversation rather than repair the damage. And if you continue waiting for them to validate your experience, you give them authority over whether your pain is allowed to be real. Your pain does not become legitimate only when they admit they caused it. Your memory does not become trustworthy only when they agree with it. The sleepless nights, the confusion, the anxiety in your body, and the way you gradually stopped recognizing yourself are all evidence that something inside the relationship was harming you. You do not need the person who wounded you to certify the wound. There comes a time when you must stop asking, will they ever admit what they did, and begin asking, what do I already know? You know how you felt. You know what you witnessed. You know which promises were broken. You know how many times your concerns were dismissed. You know how often you had to silence your instincts to preserve the relationship. You know what it costs you to remain. That knowledge may not answer every question, but it is enough to begin choosing yourself. This is not an invitation to become rigid or to believe that your perspective is infallible. Mature healing includes honest self-reflection. You can examine your mistakes, recognize where you reacted from fear, and take responsibility for anything you did that caused harm. But self-reflection is not the same as accepting responsibility for another person's choices. You can acknowledge your imperfections without turning them into an excuse for someone else's dishonesty. You can regret the way you expressed your pain without deciding that you deserve the behavior that created it. You can say, I wish I had handled certain moments differently, while also saying what happened to me was still not acceptable. This is emotional maturity, holding yourself accountable without using accountability as a weapon against yourself. Perhaps you are waiting for an apology, not a rushed, I'm sorry spoken because you were leaving, but a real apology, one that names the harm, accepts responsibility, shows remorse, and leads to changed behavior. You deserved that kind of apology. But deserving it does not guarantee that you will receive it. This is one of the most painful truths of adulthood. Sometimes the people who owe us the greatest apologies are the least capable of offering them. They may apologize only for the consequences. They may be sorry that you left, not sorry for what made leaving necessary. They may miss your presence without understanding the value of your heart. They may want access to you again without developing the character required to protect that access. Do not confuse someone's discomfort with your absence for evidence of transformation. Loneliness is not accountability. Regret is not repair. Missing you is not the same as being ready to love you differently. Real change does not appear only in emotional language. It becomes visible through consistent behavior, humility, patience, and a willingness to accept that forgiveness does not automatically restore access. Someone who has truly changed will not demand that you ignore your healing timeline to relieve their guilt. They will understand that trust must be rebuilt rather than requested. They will not treat your boundaries as punishment. They will recognize them as a natural consequence of what happened. But even if genuine change occurs, you are not obligated to return. You are allowed to believe that someone has grown and still decide that your chapter with them has ended. Forgiveness does not sign a contract for reconciliation. It does not require you to place your heart back into the same hands simply because those hands now claim to be more careful. Forgiveness can mean releasing your need to punish them while still refusing to participate in the relationship. It can mean letting go of the fantasy that their suffering will heal yours. It can mean no longer building your daily life around the hope that they will finally understand what they lost. Because revenge, even when it remains only in your imagination, keeps you tied to the person you are trying to escape. You may imagine them seeing you happy and regretting everything. You may want them to witness your success, beauty, peace, or new relationship. You want your life to become undeniable evidence that they made a terrible mistake. This desire is understandable. After being devalued, the heart wants restoration. It wants the person who failed to recognize its worth to finally see it clearly. But if your healing is still a performance for the person who hurt you, they remain your audience. They continue occupying the center of a life they no longer deserve to influence. Your peace becomes real when it no longer needs to be witnessed by them. Your growth becomes freedom when it is no longer designed to make them regret losing you. You do not need their regret to prove that leaving was right. You do not need their jealousy to prove that you are valuable. You do not need them to suffer in order for your life to become beautiful again. Their punishment is not your purpose. Your restoration is. Closure begins when you stop asking the past, to become fair. This does not mean justice is unimportant. It does not mean that consequences should disappear or that harmful behavior should be excused. It means accepting that justice may not arrive in the form you imagined. Perhaps they will never confess. Perhaps other people will believe their version. Perhaps they will move forward without showing visible remorse. Perhaps they will appear happy while you are still rebuilding yourself. Do not measure justice by appearances. You do not know what another person carries when no one is watching. More importantly, their internal consequences are no longer your assignment. Your life cannot remain paused until their life reflects the lesson you believe they deserve. You have your own lesson to live. The lesson is that you can survive without every question being answered. You can heal without receiving the apology. You can move forward without being understood by the person committed to misunderstanding you. You can create closure by accepting what the relationship repeatedly revealed. Closure may sound like this: I may never know every reason, but I know what the experience did to me. I may never receive a complete apology, but I no longer need permission to heal. I cannot change what happened, but I can decide what happens next. I release the responsibility of making them understand. I will no longer abandon myself while waiting for someone else to acknowledge that they abandoned me. These are not words you say once and immediately become free. You may need to repeat them whenever memory reopens the conversation. Healing is often repetitive because attachment was repetitive. You did not lose yourself in a single moment, and you may not reclaim yourself in one either. Each time you resist the urge to ask one more question, you reclaim a little energy. Each time you refuse to explain your worth to someone who mishandled it, you strengthen your dignity. Each time you accept that their silence is information, you move closer to peace. Eventually, you will understand that closure was never hidden inside their explanation. It was waiting inside your acceptance. You were searching for one final answer from them, but perhaps the final answer is the one you now give yourself. It happened. It hurt me. It changed me. But it will not own the rest of my life. That is how the door closes. Not because the past has been corrected. Not because every question has disappeared, but because you have finally decided that unanswered questions will no longer have unlimited access to your future. After you walk away, you may discover that grief is not the only emotion waiting for you. There may also be anger. Not the brief anger of a single argument, but something older and heavier, the kind that has been gathering quietly through every disappointment you were expected to forgive, every truth you were pressured to question, and every boundary that was crossed after you clearly explained why it mattered. Perhaps you are angry with the person who hurt you. Perhaps you are angry with the people who watched and said nothing. Perhaps you are angry with yourself for staying, believing, excusing, returning, or giving one final chance many times. Do not rush to silence that anger. Anger is not always evidence that you are bitter. Sometimes anger is the first part of you that clearly understands you deserved better. For a long time, sadness may have kept you focused on what you lost. Anger begins to show you what was taken, ignored, or violated. It remembers the dignity you were asked to sacrifice and the reality you were encouraged to deny. Anger says, that should not have happened. It says, I should not have been treated that way. It says, my pain mattered even when they behaved as though it did not. There is truth inside those statements. If you force yourself to forgive before you have allowed yourself to acknowledge that truth, Forgiveness may become another form of emotional suppression. You may say that you have moved on while your body remains tense. You may insist that you are at peace while resentment continues to shape your thoughts. You may use spiritual language to rise above feelings that still need to be understood. But emotions do not disappear simply because you believe you should no longer have them. Unacknowledged anger often changes its clothing. Sometimes it becomes anxiety. Sometimes it becomes numbness. Sometimes it becomes self-criticism, depression, exhaustion, or distrust toward people who have done nothing to harm you. Sometimes anger that cannot be directed toward the person who caused the wound turns inward and begins attacking you. It tells you that you should have known better. It calls you foolish for believing. It punishes you for every warning sign you ignored. It says that if you had been stronger, wiser, or more discerning, none of this would have happened. But you must be careful here. There is a difference between learning from your choices and condemning yourself for having made them. You can recognize that you stayed too long without deciding that you deserved what happened while you stayed. You can acknowledge that fear, loneliness, hope, financial dependence, family pressure, emotional manipulation, or an attachment to potential influence your decisions. That understanding is not an excuse. It is context. And context helps you learn without destroying your compassion for the woman you used to be. She may not have had the clarity you possess now. She may have been trying to preserve a family. She may have believed love meant endurance. She may have been afraid of starting again. She may have been taught that a good woman keeps forgiving, keeps waiting, and keeps carrying the emotional weight no one else is willing to hold. Perhaps she stayed because leaving required a strength she had not yet developed. Do not hate her for surviving with the tools available to her. You are here now because she kept going long enough for you to become the woman capable of making a different choice. Your anger toward yourself needs direction, not punishment. Let it become a promise that you will listen sooner next time. A promise that you will not explain away repeated disrespect. A promise that loneliness will never again be used as evidence that you should return to what diminished you. A promise that you will believe patterns, honor your instincts, and stop confusing emotional suffering with devotion. Anger becomes wisdom when it teaches you what you will no longer permit. But anger becomes a prison when your entire identity begins organizing itself around the wound. There comes a point when anger is no longer standing guard over your dignity. It is occupying your inner life. You think about the person while waking up. You rehearse old conversations while driving. You imagine what you should have said. You build arguments they will never hear and prepare responses to questions they may never ask. Your body remains in a conflict that has already ended. The person may no longer be physically present, but the struggle continues inside you. This is the moment when anger's role must change. You do not have to shame it or force it to disappear. You can thank it for what it protected while refusing to let it control where you go next. You can say, "You reminded me that I mattered. You helped me recognize what was unacceptable. You gave me the energy to leave when sadness wanted me to stay. But I no longer need to remain emotionally at war in order to prove that what happened was wrong." This is where forgiveness begins, not as approval, reunion, or forgetfulness, but as the gradual release of your need to carry the offender inside your mind. Forgiveness does not say, "It was acceptable." It says, "It will not continue living through me." It does not say, "There should be no consequences." It says, "I will no longer make my peace dependent on witnessing those consequences." It does not remove accountability. It removes your obligation to remain emotionally chained to the person you are holding accountable. You may worry that releasing your anger means betraying yourself. Perhaps anger feels like the only remaining witness to what happened. If you let it go, you fear the wound will be minimized, forgotten, or rewritten. But your memory does not require constant suffering to remain true. You do not need to reopen the wound every day to prove that it once existed. A scar does not deny the injury. It shows that your body found a way to close what had been broken. You can remember without reliving. You can tell the truth without staying inside the moment the truth was violated. You can protect yourself without allowing suspicion to govern every new connection. Letting go of anger is not something you accomplish through a single decision. It may happen in layers. One day, you release the need for an apology. Another day, you release the desire to be vindicated. Later, you stop checking whether they have changed or suffered. Eventually, you notice that several hours have passed without thinking about them. Then an entire day, their name no longer causes the same reaction in your body. You may still remember, but the memory has lost its authority. This gradual release is not weakness. It is your nervous system learning that the danger is no longer present. Be patient with this process. Your mind may understand that the relationship has ended long before your body feels safe. A certain song, location, date, or phrase may suddenly return you to the pain. You may feel angry again after believing you had moved forward. This does not mean that your healing has failed. Healing is not a straight road. Old feelings can visit without becoming your home again. When anger returns, become curious before becoming judgmental. Ask what it is protecting. Has a current boundary been crossed? Did something remind you of an injustice that was never acknowledged? Are you tired, lonely, or afraid? Is there a truth you have been avoiding because facing it would require another difficult decision? Listen to the emotion, but do not surrender the steering wheel to it. Your anger can inform you without commanding you. It can help you recognize danger without convincing you that everyone is dangerous. It can teach you discernment without turning discernment into permanent distrust. This distinction matters because unresolved anger can make the person who hurt you the author of relationships they will never enter. You may push away people who show genuine care. You may interpret consistency as manipulation. You may become suspicious of tenderness because tenderness was once used to regain your trust before another betrayal. You may decide that needing no one is the safest way to live. But healing is not becoming impossible to reach. Healing is becoming wise enough to know who deserves access. You do not need to build walls so high that love can never find you. You need boundaries strong enough to prevent disrespect from entering disguised as love. A wall says, "No one will ever come close enough to hurt me." A boundary says, "Only those who approach with honesty, consistency, and respect may come close." One is built from fear. The other is built from self-knowledge. Walking away teaches you that protecting your heart does not require hardening it. You can remain soft, without becoming naive. You can remain compassionate without becoming available for mistreatment. You can forgive without inviting someone back. You can wish them well without needing to witness where their life goes. And you can release your anger without revising the truth. Perhaps the most powerful thing you will one day say is not, "They finally paid for what they did." Perhaps it is, "What they did no longer determines who I am." They may have influenced a chapter, but they do not own the entire story. They may have introduced you to pain, but they do not get to decide whether pain becomes your permanent personality. They may have wounded your trust, but they do not have the right to receive every future version of you through suspicion, resentment, and fear. That right belongs to you. Your anger helped you survive the moment when you finally understood that staying was costing you yourself. Honor it for that. Then, when you are ready, let it put down its weapon. The battle is over. You do not have to keep bleeding to prove that you won. After walking away, there's often one person you still struggle to forgive: yourself. You may forgive the person who lied to you before you forgive yourself for believing them. You may understand their wounds before you understand why you kept returning. You may eventually release your anger toward them while continuing to punish yourself for staying longer than you now believe you should have. The relationship ends, but the trial inside your mind begins. You become both the accused and the judge. You replay every warning sign and ask why you ignored it. You remember the first broken promise, the first cruel comment, the first unexplained absence, or the first moment your intuition told you something was wrong. Looking back, the pattern seems obvious. But it was not always obvious while you were living inside it. Hindsight collects moments that once arrived separately and places them together. It creates a complete picture from details you encountered slowly, often between affection, apologies, explanations, and periods of hope. You did not know at the beginning everything you knew at the end. Do not judge your former self as though she possessed information that only experience could give her. Maybe you noticed the signs but did not yet understand what they meant. Maybe you understood them but were not emotionally prepared to accept their consequences. Maybe leaving would have required financial stability, practical support, or inner strength you were still building. Maybe you remained because children, family, faith, fear, shame, or social expectations made the decision more complicated than outsiders could see. Maybe you simply loved someone and believed what they repeatedly promised you. That does not make you weak. It makes you human. Manipulation rarely begins with unmistakable cruelty. If it did, fewer people would remain. It often begins with warmth, attention, vulnerability, and the feeling that you have finally found someone who sees you. The painful behavior may emerge gradually. A boundary is crossed and then explained. A lie is revealed and then minimized. A cruel moment is followed by tenderness. Distance is followed by intense affection. You begin responding not only to the person in front of you, but also to the person they were at the beginning and the person they promised to become again. This is why leaving can take time. You are not only evaluating harm, you are comparing it with memories of love and imagining its possible return. You may have stayed because every time you reached your limit, they gave you just enough hope to question whether leaving was necessary. Do not confuse this confusion with stupidity. Your capacity to trust was not the crime. Their misuse of that trust was. Still, self-forgiveness does not mean refusing to examine your decisions. Compassion without honesty cannot produce growth. There may be places where you abandon your own knowing. Perhaps you ignored your body when it tightened around them. Perhaps you dismissed concerns because you feared being alone. Perhaps you accepted apologies without requiring change. Perhaps you defended them to people who were trying to protect you. Perhaps you kept lowering your standards so the relationship could continue meeting them. You can tell the truth about these choices without turning truth into cruelty. Say, I ignored myself, but do not add because I was worthless. Say, I was afraid to leave, but do not add because I was weak. Say, I accepted less than I deserved, but do not conclude, therefore I deserved less. Your behavior may reveal where you needed healing. It does not define the value of the person who needed it. There were reasons you tolerated what now seems intolerable. Perhaps inconsistency felt familiar because you grew up trying to earn affection from someone emotionally unavailable. Maybe you learned that love must be proven through sacrifice. Maybe conflict in your childhood taught you to become quiet, accommodating, and skilled at reading the moods of everyone around you. Perhaps you were praised for being the strong one, the woman who asked for little, handled everything, forgave quickly, and never became a burden. That identity may have followed you into adulthood. You became excellent at understanding other people and unfamiliar with expecting them to understand you. You learned to call emotional neglect independence. You called overgiving generosity. You called silence peace. You called self-abandonment love. This does not mean you are permanently damaged. It means certain survival strategies outlived the circumstances that created them. What protected you in one season may have harmed you in another. Being highly aware of other people's emotions may once have helped you remain safe, but later it may have trained you to prioritize everyone else's comfort over your own truth. Forgiving yourself means recognizing that you were often attempting to find love using lessons learned in places where love was incomplete. Now you have the opportunity to learn differently. You can learn that love is not something you must earn by tolerating pain. You can learn that another person's disappointment does not automatically mean your boundary is wrong. You can learn that saying no is not an act of cruelty. You can learn that leaving someone who repeatedly harms you is not the same as abandoning someone during a difficult season. Every relationship encounters difficulties, but difficulty and destruction are not the same. A difficult season can be faced by two people who accept responsibility, communicate honestly, and work toward repair. A destructive pattern asks one person to carry the pain while the other avoids accountability. A difficult season may exhaust you temporarily. A destructive pattern gradually erases you. You did not fail because you could no longer carry something that was never meant to be carried alone. Perhaps you worry that you wasted years. This thought can become another form of punishment. You calculate how much time you invested and imagine where your life might be if you had left sooner. You picture an alternate version of yourself, happier, freer, more successful, perhaps already loved by someone capable of meeting her fully. Be careful with this imaginary woman. She has never had to live the reality you survived. It is easy to make perfect decisions inside a life that exists only in your mind. Yes, time passed. Yes, there may be opportunities you missed and parts of yourself you neglected. You are allowed to grieve those losses. But calling those years entirely wasted ignores what you now carry because you lived through them. You know how self-abandonment feels. You recognize the cost of ignoring your intuition. You understand the difference between an apology and accountability. You have learned that chemistry cannot compensate for inconsistency and that love cannot build a safe home without honesty. These lessons were expensive. Do not make them meaningless by refusing to use them. The past becomes wasted only when you continue repeating it because you are too ashamed to study it. Let regret become instruction. Let it refine your standards. Let it teach you to act more quickly when your dignity is repeatedly compromised. But do not allow regret to become a lifetime sentence. You have suffered enough. Self-forgiveness may begin with changing the questions you ask. Instead of asking, "Why was I so foolish?" ask, "What was I afraid would happen if I left?" Instead of asking, "Why did I allow this?" ask, "What did I believe I had to tolerate in order to be loved?" Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" ask, "Which wounded part of me believed this was the best I could receive?" These questions do not excuse your choices. They reveal them, and what can be understood can begin to be healed. You may discover that you were not only attached to the person, you were attached to what being chosen by them seemed to prove. Perhaps winning their consistency would have made you feel worthy. Perhaps receiving their apology would have confirmed that you were not imagining the harm. Perhaps getting them to change would have transformed all your sacrifices into evidence that staying had been right. But your worth was never supposed to depend on your ability to convince someone to treat you well. You do not become valuable when they recognize your value. You were valuable while they ignored it. You were valuable while you doubted it. You were valuable during every moment you accepted less than you deserved. Your choices may not always have honored your worth, but they never removed it. That distinction is essential. Self-forgiveness is not saying that every decision was wise. It is saying that no unwise decision makes you undeserving of compassion, healing, and another beginning. You are allowed to outgrow the woman who stayed without despising her. You are allowed to become wiser without calling your former self foolish. You are allowed to say, "I would choose differently now," and recognize those words as evidence of growth. Of course, you would choose differently now. The woman making today's decision was created partly through the consequences of yesterday's one. When shame tells you that you should have left sooner, answer gently, "I left when I was finally able to sustain the leaving." Because leaving is not only walking through a door, it is resisting the urge to return when loneliness appears. It is accepting the end of the fantasy. It is learning how to live without the familiar cycle. It is rebuilding the identity that became entangled with the relationship. It is choosing yourself repeatedly, long after the first moment of departure. Perhaps earlier versions of you tried to leave but could not yet remain gone. Do not mock those attempts. Each one was practice. Every temporary boundary revealed that some part of you already knew the truth. Every return taught you something about the attachment. Every disappointment weakened the illusion until you were finally strong enough to see it clearly. Now you are here. You cannot return to the past and rescue the woman who stayed, but you can stop punishing her in the present. You can honor her by creating the life she could not yet imagine. You can give her the safety she kept seeking from someone else. You can protect her tenderness without being ashamed that she possessed it. And you can promise her that the lesson has been learned. Say to her, I understand why you hoped. I understand why you were afraid. I understand why you wanted love to be enough. You did not deserve what happened. I forgive you for the boundaries you had not yet learned to build. I forgive you for the truth you were not ready to accept. I forgive you for leaving yourself while trying to prevent someone else from leaving. And from this moment forward, I will not abandon you again. That is not weakness speaking. That is the sound of self-trust being rebuilt. You do not heal by hating the woman you were. You heal by becoming the woman she needed. There is a dangerous misunderstanding about forgiveness that has kept many women inside relationships that continue to wound them. They have been taught that forgiveness means reopening the door. They believe that if they are truly healed, they should answer the call, accept the apology, restore the relationship, and behave as though the past no longer matters. They fear that distance makes them bitter. They fear that saying no makes them cruel. They fear that protecting themselves means they have failed to forgive. But forgiveness and access are not the same thing. You can release resentment without restoring intimacy. You can stop wishing harm on someone without allowing them to return to the place where they harmed you. You can forgive what happened while remaining honest about what the experience taught you. Forgiveness concerns what you choose to carry inside your heart. Reconciliation concerns whether two people can safely rebuild a relationship. The first can happen within you. The second requires accountability, change, consistency, and the willing participation of both people. You can forgive alone. You cannot reconcile alone. This distinction may be one of the most important lessons walking away will ever teach you. For years, perhaps you were the one doing the emotional work for two people. You initiated every difficult conversation. You explained the problem, suggested the solution, accepted partial apologies, and carried the responsibility of keeping the connection alive. Whenever the relationship began to collapse, you became the builder. Whenever trust was broken, you became the one searching for ways to restore it. Whenever they withdrew, you crossed the distance. You may have called this commitment, but commitment cannot remain healthy when only one person is committed to repair. A relationship cannot be rebuilt by the person who was wounded, while the person who caused the wound continues denying that anything happened. This is why your boundary matters. A boundary is not an attempt to control another person. It does not say you must change because I demand it. It says, you are free to make your choices, and I am free to decide what access those choices permit. A boundary is not a punishment. It is information about what you require in order to remain emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and sometimes physically safe. You may say, I will not continue conversations in which I am insulted. I will not remain in a relationship where dishonesty is repeated. I will not explain the same wound to someone who continues using my explanation as a map for where to hurt me. I will not accept an apology that asks me to forget but requires no change from the person apologizing. I will care about you, but I will no longer sacrifice myself to prove it. These words may feel harsh if you have spent your life prioritizing other people's comfort. When you are accustomed to overgiving, Even basic self-protection can feel selfish. But discomfort does not always mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes discomfort means you are doing something new. You may feel guilty the first time you refuse to answer. You may feel anxious when you do not rush to resolve someone else's disappointment. You may question yourself when they accuse you of changing, and perhaps you have changed. You no longer accept the behavior you once excused. You no longer interpret endurance as the highest expression of love. You no longer believe that being a good person requires unlimited availability to people who repeatedly misuse it. That change is not a failure of your character. It is evidence that your self-respect has begun influencing your decisions. People who benefited from the version of you without boundaries may resist the version of you who has them. They may call you cold because warmth once gave them access without accountability. They may call you unforgiving because forgiveness once meant escaping consequences. They may say you are holding on to the past because the past contains information they would prefer you to ignore. Do not let their discomfort define your healing. A person's reaction to your boundary often reveals why the boundary was necessary. Someone who respects you may feel disappointed, but they will still recognize your right to protect yourself. Someone focused only on access will treat your independence as an attack. You do not have to defend every boundary in a courtroom of public opinion. Not everyone needs to understand your decision. Some people knew only the version of the relationship that appeared in public. They saw the photographs, celebrations, and moments when everything looked peaceful. They did not witness the private confusion, the repeated conversations, or the nights you carried pain silently. You may be tempted to reveal every detail so others will approve of your departure. But your freedom cannot depend on winning a vote. You are allowed to leave a situation that was breaking you even if no one else fully understands why. Your life is not a public trial. Your peace does not require unanimous agreement. This is especially important when the person you left tells a different story. Perhaps they describe you as unreasonable, unstable, disloyal, or impossible to satisfy. They may speak only about the moment you finally reacted while remaining silent about the pattern that preceded it. They may present your boundary as cruelty and their behavior as an innocent mistake. Resist the urge to chase every misunderstanding. You will exhaust yourself trying to correct a version of events designed to protect someone else from accountability. Tell the truth where it is necessary and safe. Then let your life become the evidence of what your decision restored. Not everyone who misunderstands you needs an explanation. Some people need time. Others have already chosen the story they prefer. Your energy is too valuable to spend proving your innocence to an audience committed to your guilt. A boundary also means deciding how much access the past receives through your own habits. You may have stopped speaking to the person while continuing to visit their life every day through social media. You check whether they appear happy, whether they are with someone new, or whether they have posted anything that might secretly refer to you. Each time you look, you reopen a window you were trying to close. You tell yourself that you are only curious. But curiosity can become a quiet form of emotional self-harm when it repeatedly exposes you to information that disrupts your healing. You do not need to know everything they do after you leave. You do not need to monitor whether they become better for someone else. You do not need evidence that they miss you. Blocking, muting, unfollowing, or removing access may not be immature. Sometimes it is the practical structure your heart needs while it learns to detach. You are not required to remain visible to someone simply to demonstrate that you are unaffected. You do not have to watch their life in order to prove that you have moved on. Real detachment often grows in private. It grows when you stop checking. It grows when you stop waiting for their name to appear on your screen. It grows when you no longer design your posts, success, or happiness as messages they might interpret. It grows when your life stops being a conversation with someone who is no longer present. There may also be moments when they return. They may come back with the words you once longed to hear. They may say they have changed, finally understand, or now recognize what they lost. Their return may awaken the hope you thought you had buried. Before responding, pause. Do not allow one emotional conversation to erase the pattern that required you to leave. Ask what has actually changed. Is there accountability without blame? Is there remorse without manipulation? Has their behavior changed consistently over time? Do they respect your hesitation, or do they pressure you to trust quickly? Are they interested in repairing the harm or only in relieving their discomfort? Do they accept that you may forgive them and still choose not to return? Words can open a conversation, but only patterns can rebuild trust. You are not cruel for requiring evidence. Trust is not a gift you owe someone because they apologized. It is the natural result of repeated experiences of safety, honesty, and reliability. And sometimes, even sincere change does not obligate you to reopen the relationship. The other person may grow, and your answer may still be no. Their transformation does not erase your transformation. Perhaps you have become someone who no longer belongs inside that relationship. Perhaps too much has occurred for your body to feel safe again. Perhaps peace arrived only after distance, and returning would require you to betray the wisdom you paid dearly to gain. You are allowed to honor their growth from afar. You are allowed to say, I believe you may be different, but I am no longer available to discover that through another risk to myself. This is not revenge. It is discernment. Boundaries do not mean you have stopped loving. They mean you have included yourself among the people your love must protect. For too long, you may have offered compassion outward while directing criticism inward. You understood everyone's reasons, forgave everyone's limitations, and made room for everyone's humanity except your own. Now, compassion must become complete. It must include the woman who becomes anxious when a certain name appears. It must include the woman who needs silence to hear herself again. It must include the woman whose trust cannot be restored by promises alone. It must include the woman who deserves relationships that do not require constant recovery. Your boundary is a promise to her. It says, I will no longer place you where you must repeatedly prove that your pain matters. It says, I will listen when your body warns me. It says, I will not exchange your peace for temporary companionship. It says, I will forgive, but I will not forget the lesson. Forgetting the lesson is not proof of healing. Healing means remembering without remaining emotionally imprisoned. It means using what happened to make wiser choices, not harder walls. It means becoming more discerning without becoming incapable of love. You do not need to fear that boundaries will leave you alone forever. Healthy boundaries do not prevent genuine love from reaching you. They make space for love that knows how to knock, wait, listen, and enter with respect. The people meant for your healed life will not require you to abandon yourself in order to keep them. They will not punish your honesty. They will not make you feel guilty for having needs. They will not treat your limits as obstacles to overcome. They will understand that closeness is a privilege maintained through care. Walking away taught you that love without boundaries can become captivity. Healing will teach you that boundaries without bitterness can become freedom. You can remain kind. You can remain open. You can remain capable of deep love. But you no longer have to remain accessible to everything you have forgiven. Walking away may save your dignity, but it does not immediately remove your loneliness. There will be moments when the silence feels heavier than the pain you left behind. Nights when you miss the familiar sound of their voice. Mornings when your hand reaches for the phone before your mind remembers that the relationship has ended. In those moments, you may begin negotiating with the past. Perhaps it was not as bad as you remember. Perhaps you expected too much. Perhaps they deserve one more opportunity. Perhaps having someone imperfect is better than having no one at all. Loneliness can make familiar pain look like safety. It can persuade you to return not because the relationship has changed, but because the absence feels unbearable. It can turn a harmful connection into a shelter simply because you recognize its walls. But familiarity is not the same as safety. You knew how to survive that relationship. You knew when to remain quiet, how to interpret their moods, and which needs to hide. You learned how to prepare for disappointment and how to recover when affection was withdrawn. Your body may confuse this predictability with security. At least you knew what to expect. Now you are standing in a life that has not yet taken shape. The old structure is gone, but the new one has not been built. This space between what ended and what begins can feel frightening. It is tempting to call this emptiness, but it may be openness. Not every empty space must be filled immediately. Some spaces need to remain quiet long enough for you to discover what belongs there. If you rush to escape loneliness, you may return to the person you left or enter another relationship carrying the same unhealed beliefs. You may choose someone because they make the silence disappear, not because they can offer the honesty, safety, and reciprocity your life now requires. This is how old patterns find new faces. The details change, but the emotional structure remains familiar. You overgive. You explain away inconsistency. You become attached to potential. You mistake being pursued for being valued. You silence concerns because you are afraid that speaking honestly will make the person leave. Healing asks you to tolerate the temporary discomfort of being alone so that fear does not choose your next relationship. There is a difference between solitude and abandonment. Abandonment says, no one is coming and I cannot survive by myself. Solitude says, I am here and I am learning not to leave myself. At first, solitude may feel unnatural because you have spent years directing your energy outward. You knew what the other person needed, feared, wanted, and expected. Their moods shape the atmosphere of your days. Without them, you may not know what to do with your attention. Turn it gently toward yourself. Ask simple questions. What makes you feel rested? What did you enjoy before the relationship demanded so much of you? Which parts of your home, routine, appearance, or future would you choose differently if no one else's preferences controlled the answer? When do you feel most like yourself? What have you been postponing? You do not need to reinvent your entire life at once. Healing often begins with ordinary acts. Prepare a meal because it nourishes you. Walk without checking whether someone has contacted you. Listen to music that belongs to no shared memory. Move something in your home. Return to a friendship. Read the book you never finished. Sleep without keeping your phone close enough to interrupt your peace. These actions may appear small, but they send a powerful message to your nervous system. Life continues, and you are capable of participating in it. For a while, you may still feel their absence in everything. A restaurant will remind you of a conversation. A certain road will bring back a memory. A date on the calendar will hold meaning that no one else can see. Do not interpret these reminders as instructions to return. Memory is not direction. Missing someone is not a command. An emotion can be honored without being obeyed. You can say, I miss them today, without adding, therefore I must contact them. You can say, this hurts, without concluding, therefore leaving was wrong. Pain after a necessary decision does not make the decision unnecessary. Sometimes pain is simply the price of refusing to repeat what was destroying you. When the urge to return appears, ask what you truly need. Do you need the person, or do you need comfort? Do you need the relationship, or do you need reassurance that you are still lovable? Do you miss who they consistently were, or the moments when they temporarily became who you needed? Are you longing for them, or are you longing to escape the uncertainty of beginning again? These questions create space between emotion and action. Inside that space, your wisdom can speak. Loneliness often tells you that no one else will love you. It says that you have waited too long, aged too much, been wounded too deeply, or become too complicated to begin again. It may tell you that the relationship you left was your final chance. Do not build your future around the voice of a frightened moment. Fear is not prophecy. The fact that you cannot currently see the love ahead of you does not mean it does not exist. More importantly, romantic love is not the only form of love capable of sustaining your life. Healing may ask you to expand your understanding of connection. Call the friend who allows you to speak without performing strength. Spend time with family members who respect your peace. Return to a community where your presence is valued. Allow safe people to help you carry what you have been carrying alone. Independence does not mean isolation. You do not have to prove your strength by refusing support. Strength also means knowing where your vulnerability will be treated with care. But choose your confidants wisely. Not everyone deserves access to your most tender healing. Some people will rush you. Some will pressure you to return because your relationship made their lives more comfortable. Others will encourage revenge because your anger entertains them. Seek those who can hold complexity, people who will not shame you for missing someone you needed to leave, but who will also remind you why you left when nostalgia begins rewriting the past. You need witnesses who protect your truth without feeding your bitterness. There may be days when no one is available, On those days, practice becoming a safe presence for yourself. Place your hand over your heart and breathe slowly. Name what you are feeling without judgment. Say, I am lonely, but I am not abandoned. Say, this feeling is temporary. Say, I do not have to make a permanent decision to escape a temporary emotion. Say, I can survive tonight without reopening the door. Sometimes healing is that simple and that difficult. Choosing not to send the message, not to make the call, and not to seek comfort in the place that created the wound. Each time you resist returning, you build evidence that you can trust yourself. Self-trust is not created through promises alone. It grows when your actions show your heart that you will protect it even when protection feels uncomfortable. You told yourself you would no longer accept the pattern. Now loneliness will test whether you meant it. This is not punishment. It is practice. Every difficult evening you survive becomes proof that discomfort does not control you. Every moment of missing them without contacting them strengthens your ability to choose wisdom over impulse. Every time you seek healthy comfort instead of familiar chaos, you create a new emotional pathway. One day, the silence will change. It will no longer feel like the absence of someone else. It will feel like the presence of your own life. You will notice that your home feels calmer. Your thoughts are no longer constantly interrupted by uncertainty. Your body is not preparing for the next conflict. You can make plans without wondering whether someone else's mood will ruin them. You can rest. This peace may seem ordinary to people who have never lived in emotional instability, but to you, it will feel sacred. You will understand that what you once called loneliness was sometimes your nervous system withdrawing from chaos. You were not empty. You were becoming still, and in that stillness, you began hearing needs that had been buried beneath the relationship. Perhaps you need more than romance. You need purpose. You need creativity. You need friendship. You need spiritual grounding. You need laughter that does not arrive as relief after pain. You need a life so deeply connected to your own values that no single person can become its entire foundation. A healthy relationship should enter a life. It should not replace one. Love should expand your world, not reduce it to the emotional availability of one person. Walking away gives you the opportunity to rebuild a life that belongs to you, not a life designed to prove that you are fine, not a life created to make them regret losing you, not a life hurried into another relationship because being alone makes you feel unchosen. Build slowly. Choose what is truthful. Let your days become evidence that your existence has value even when no one is romantically claiming it. You are not waiting for life to begin again. It is already happening. It is happening each time you wake without checking on them. It is happening each time you make a decision without considering how they might react. It is happening each time you laugh and realize for one brief moment that the pain was not present. These moments will grow. The grief will loosen. The silence will soften. Your heart will remember how to belong to you. And one day, if love finds you again, you will not reach for it from desperation. You will meet it from wholeness. You will not ask, will you save me from being alone? You will ask, can you stand beside the life I have learned to love? Until then, do not return merely because the night feels long. Morning is still coming, and when it arrives, you may discover that the person you were waiting for was not the one who left. It was the woman within you who finally decided to stay. There is a quiet question that often appears after the grief begins to soften. Who am I now? For so long, your identity may have been shaped around the relationship. You were the one who waited, understood, repaired, forgave, and tried again. You organized your emotions around another person's moods, needs, decisions, and availability. Perhaps you became so skilled at maintaining the connection that you stopped noticing how disconnected you had become from yourself. Now the relationship is over, and the role you played inside it has ended. You may feel free, but you may also feel unfamiliar to yourself. This is not because you have lost everything you are. It is because parts of you have been silent for so long that hearing them again feels like meeting someone new. Walking away does not simply remove you from a painful relationship. It gives you the opportunity to recover the identity you placed aside in order to survive it. Perhaps there was a version of you who laughed more freely. She had interests that belonged only to her. She made plans without waiting to see whether someone else would approve. She wore what made her feel alive, spoke with confidence, and trusted her own perception. She did not spend every day analyzing silence. She did not confuse anxiety with love. She did not believe that asking for honesty would make her difficult. That woman has not disappeared. She may be tired. She may be guarded. She may be waiting to see whether you are finally safe enough to return to. Do not demand that she come back all at once. You cannot erase years of self-abandonment through one confident morning. Identity restoration happens through small acts of remembering. You begin by noticing what is yours, your preferences, your voice, your pace, your values, your dreams, your body, your time, your right to say yes, your right to say no. These things may seem obvious, but they can feel revolutionary after a relationship in which your inner world was repeatedly dismissed. You may have learned to ask for permission before making ordinary decisions. You may have adjusted your clothing, friendships, ambitions, or opinions to prevent conflict. You may have delayed opportunities because your growth made someone else uncomfortable. You may have stopped sharing good news because it was met with competition rather than celebration. You may even have reduced your joy so that another person would not accuse you of changing. Now you must practice taking up space in your own life again, not space stolen from anyone else, not space created through domination or revenge. The natural space that belongs to every human being, the freedom to exist without constantly apologizing for existing. This reclamation may begin with your voice. Say what you mean, not cruelly, not impulsively, but honestly. If something hurts, name it. If something matters, honor it. If you do not want something, let no be a complete truth rather than the beginning of a long defense. You do not have to package every boundary in enough softness to guarantee that no one feels disappointed. Kindness matters, but kindness does not require self-erasure. You may have learned to over-explain because your simple truth was never accepted. You gave reasons, examples, and emotional evidence. You tried to make your needs impossible to dismiss. Still, they were dismissed. Now practice saying, "That does not work for me. I am not comfortable with that. I need time to think. I do not wish to continue this conversation. I have made my decision. These statements may initially make your body anxious. You may feel an urge to add another paragraph, apologize, or reverse your position when someone reacts poorly. Pause. Let other people have their feelings without making those feelings your emergency. Someone's disappointment does not automatically mean you have harmed them. Sometimes disappointment is simply what another person feels when your choice does not serve their preference. You are not responsible for eliminating every uncomfortable emotion from the lives of people around you. You are responsible for behaving with integrity. Integrity includes honesty with others, but it also includes honesty with yourself. The woman you are reclaiming needs to know that you will no longer lie on her behalf. You will not say yes when she means no. You will not call disrespect a misunderstanding merely to preserve a connection. You will not force her to remain where she feels repeatedly unsafe. You will not use her compassion as a reason to ignore her exhaustion. Every time your outer decision matches your inner truth, self-trust grows. This is how identity returns, not through declarations, but through alignment. You may also need to reclaim your body. Painful relationships often teach women to live inside their minds. You analyze, anticipate, rehearse, and prepare. Your attention moves away from your physical experience because surviving the emotional instability requires constant thought. Return gently to the body that carried you through it. Notice where you hold tension. Notice how often you stop breathing deeply. Notice whether rest makes you feel guilty. Notice whether you treat your body only as something to improve, judge, or make desirable to someone else. Your body is not evidence to present in a competition for love. It is your home. It deserves food, movement, sleep, medical care, affection, and respect, not because these things will make someone choose you, but because you already belong to yourself. Care for your appearance if it brings you joy. Wear colors that awaken something inside you. Change your hair if the change feels like expression rather than an attempt to prove that the breakup made you more desirable. You do not need to become visibly transformed for your healing to be real. Some of your greatest changes will not photograph well. You will sleep through the night. You will stop rereading old messages. You will say no without shaking. You will recognize emotional unavailability before becoming attached to it. You will leave a conversation the first time someone becomes intentionally cruel. No one may applaud these changes, but they will alter the course of your life. Reclaiming yourself also means remembering that you are more than what happened to you. For a while, the wound may become the center of your story. You speak about the betrayal, the abandonment, the manipulation, or the years you lost, because these experiences are still demanding meaning. There is nothing wrong with telling the truth. Your story deserves language. But eventually, healing invites you to widen the narrative. You were a whole person before the wound. You remained a whole person while you were wounded, even when you could not feel it. And you will be a whole person after the wound no longer occupies every room inside you. You are not merely the woman who was betrayed. You are the woman who can still create, still learn, still laugh, still build, still serve, still love, still become The wound may explain certain fears, but it does not own your personality. Do not make pain your permanent introduction. There will come a day when you can speak about what happened without feeling that it is the most important thing anyone should know about you. That day cannot be forced, but it can be welcomed. You welcome it by investing in parts of your life that have nothing to do with recovery. Learn something new. Create something that did not exist before you touched it. Travel somewhere that holds no shared memory. Strengthen your work. Return to a spiritual practice that helps you feel rooted. Give your attention to causes, people, and possibilities larger than the person who hurt you. This is not avoidance. It is expansion. The relationship made your world smaller. Healing must make it larger again. As your life expands, you may encounter grief over the opportunities you postponed. Perhaps you abandoned a dream because the relationship consumed your energy. Perhaps you remained financially dependent longer than you intended. Perhaps you stopped developing your gifts because survival left little room for imagination. Do not use this awareness as another reason to punish yourself. Begin where you are. The life you could have lived is gone, but the life still available to you is not. You may not be starting at the age, place, or condition you once imagined. Begin anyway. There is dignity in beginning late. There is courage in building after loss. There is beauty in watching a woman become herself at the moment the world expected her to settle for less. You are not behind. You are arriving with knowledge you did not possess before. Your pace may be slower now because you understand the cost of rushing into what has not earned your trust. Let it be slow. A slow beginning can still lead to a beautiful life. During this process, you may discover that some relationships no longer fit. When you change the way you value yourself, your tolerance changes with it. Friendships built around your constant giving may become uncomfortable. Family dynamics that depended on your silence may begin to resist you. You may lose more than the original relationship. This can feel unfair. You thought leaving one painful situation would end the conflict, but healing reveals every place where the old version of you was required to survive. Do not be frightened by this revelation. You are not losing everyone. You are discovering which connections were attached to your self-abandonment. The people capable of loving the real you may need time to adjust, but they will not require you to disappear. They will make room for your voice. They will respect your limits. They will celebrate growth that does not benefit them directly. And they will not ask you to return to a wounded version of yourself because she was easier to control. Some people will say, "You are not the person you used to be." You may answer quietly, "I hope not." You did not endure all of this merely to return unchanged. The purpose of healing is not to restore the woman who could tolerate the old life. It is to reveal the woman who can build a new one. This woman does not need to be fearless. She only needs to stop allowing fear to make every decision. She does not need to be completely healed. She only needs to remain committed to her healing. She does not need to know exactly where the road leads. She only needs to trust herself enough to take the next honest step. There will still be days when you miss who you were before the pain, but perhaps you are not meant to go backward. Perhaps the goal is not to recover your innocence exactly as it was. Perhaps it is to combine your old tenderness with your new discernment, to become soft but not easily deceived, open but not unprotected. Compassionate, but not self-sacrificing. Loving, but no longer willing to confuse love with suffering. This is not a lesser version of you. It is a deeper one. Walking away showed you how much of yourself you had abandoned. Healing is teaching you how to return. And each time you choose truth over performance, peace over chaos, and dignity over temporary approval, another part of you comes home. One day, you will look into the mirror and no longer search for the woman you used to be. You will recognize the woman standing there, not because she escaped the pain unchanged, but because she passed through it without allowing it to have the final word. She is not waiting to be rescued. She is not asking permission to exist. She is not begging anyone to recognize her worth. She knows who she is now. And this time, she will not abandon herself to be loved. After walking away from a relationship that taught you to question your own reality, trust does not return easily. Even when the person is gone, the uncertainty they created may remain. You may distrust compliments because beautiful words once arrived before painful behavior. You may become suspicious when someone shows affection because affection was previously used to pull you back into a cycle you were trying to escape. You may study every message for hidden meaning. You may become anxious when someone's tone changes. You may prepare for abandonment before there is any evidence that someone intends to leave. Part of you wants to believe in love again. Another part whispers, never let anyone get close enough to do that to you. This conflict is understandable. Your heart remembers tenderness, but your body remembers danger. You may tell yourself that you are simply being careful, and perhaps you are. But care can slowly become fear if every new person is forced to answer for the actions of someone from your past. The person who hurt you should not be allowed to define everyone who comes after them. If you assume that every promise is a lie, every silence is rejection, and every disagreement is the beginning of abandonment, the old relationship continues shaping your life long after it ends. Healing is not learning to trust everyone. It is learning to trust yourself enough to recognize who is trustworthy. This is a different kind of confidence. You no longer need certainty that no one will ever hurt you. No human relationship can offer that guarantee. You need confidence that if someone repeatedly reveals dishonesty, cruelty, manipulation, or emotional unavailability, you will not abandon yourself to keep them. Your safety does not come from controlling every outcome. It comes from knowing you will respond differently when the truth appears. Perhaps you once believed that healing meant becoming so wise that you would never make another mistake. You promised yourself that no one would ever deceive you again. But this promise creates an impossible burden. Even emotionally mature people can be misled. Some individuals are skilled at presenting themselves as safe. Some relationships change slowly. Some truths reveal themselves only with time. Your value does not depend on detecting every danger immediately. The goal is not perfect prediction. The goal is a loyal response to what you eventually learn. You can say, I may not notice every warning sign at once, but I will not repeatedly explain them away. I may become attached, but attachment will not silence my judgment. I may love deeply, but love will not require me to deny reality. I may experience heartbreak again, but I will not use heartbreak as proof that I should remain where I am being harmed. This is self-trust. It is not the belief that you will always know the answer. It is the belief that you will listen to yourself while discovering it. When new love enters your life, it may feel quieter than what you once called passion. There may be no dramatic chase, no emotional disappearance followed by an intense return, and no constant uncertainty about how the other person feels. At first, this steadiness may feel unfamiliar. You may mistake peace for boredom. You may wonder whether the connection is deep enough because it does not activate the same anxiety. But what you once experienced as chemistry may sometimes have been the nervous system responding to unpredictability. The high was powerful because the low was painful. Affection felt extraordinary because you had been deprived of it. Reassurance felt intoxicating because uncertainty had kept you emotionally hungry. Healthy love does not have to starve you in order to make care feel valuable. It does not require confusion to create desire. It does not disappear so that its return will feel like rescue. Healthy love is not perfect, but it is coherent. Words and actions generally agree. Concerns can be discussed without punishment. Mistakes are acknowledged rather than hidden beneath excuses. Both people are allowed to have needs. You do not spend every day trying to determine whether the relationship still exists. Consistency may not create the same dramatic intensity, but it creates something far more valuable. Safety. Safety is not dull. Safety is the freedom to be fully present because you are no longer constantly preparing for emotional danger. It allows affection to deepen without fear controlling every step. It allows you to speak honestly before resentment builds. It allows two people to disagree without treating the relationship as a weapon. And it allows you to remain yourself while loving someone else. That final part matters. You do not need to prove that you are healed by becoming endlessly accommodating again. Healing does not mean you no longer have triggers, concerns, or boundaries. It means you can communicate them without making another person entirely responsible for repairing wounds they did not create. You might say, when communication suddenly changes, I notice that I become anxious. I am working on this, but clarity helps me feel secure. I need time before I can trust deeply. Certain behaviors remind me of past experiences, and I want to discuss them without assuming your intentions. These statements are not weaknesses. They are invitations to honest intimacy. A trustworthy person will not use your history against you. They will not mock your caution or demand immediate access to the deepest parts of you. They will understand that trust develops through experience. But they should not be required to prove their innocence endlessly for wounds caused by someone else. Healing requires balance. You must neither ignore your instincts nor treat every fear as a fact. A trigger is real, but the story attached to it may belong to the past. When fear rises, pause before reacting. Ask, what is happening now? What evidence do I actually have? Is this person repeating a harmful pattern, or has an ordinary situation activated an old memory? Do I need protection, clarification, reassurance, or simply time to calm my body? This pause protects both you and the relationship. It prevents your past from speaking as though it is the present, while still allowing your present to be examined honestly. Not every uncomfortable feeling means danger. Sometimes intimacy itself feels uncomfortable because it asks you to become visible again. After betrayal, being known can feel risky. You may reveal only the parts of yourself that seem easy to love. You may hide your needs, opinions, and fears until you are certain the person will stay. But if someone loves only the version of you designed not to inconvenience them, you will once again feel alone inside a relationship. Real intimacy requires gradual truth. It requires letting someone see you without turning visibility into surrender. You can be open and still observant. You can be vulnerable and still maintain boundaries. You can give someone an opportunity to know you without giving them unlimited power over you. Vulnerability is not handing a stranger your entire heart and hoping they behave responsibly. It is allowing trust to grow in proportion to the evidence. Let people earn deeper access through consistency. Notice how they respond when you say no. Notice whether they respect your time. Notice whether they can apologize without becoming defensive. Notice how they speak about people who can do nothing for them. Notice whether they celebrate your success or become threatened by it. Notice whether they remain kind when they are disappointed. Anyone can appear loving when everything is going their way. Character becomes visible when your needs conflict with their preferences. Do not become so focused on whether someone likes you that you forget to ask whether you like who you become around them. Are you calm or constantly performing? Can you speak naturally? Do you feel respected? Can you maintain your friendships, interests, and goals? Does the relationship add to your life, or has it begun consuming your identity? Are you choosing them, or are you chasing the relief of being chosen? These questions return you to your own authority. In the past, you may have treated another person's interest as the final verdict. If they wanted you, you felt valuable. If they withdrew, you felt defective. Now you understand that mutual love requires two decisions. They are evaluating whether you belong in their life. You are also evaluating whether they belong in yours. Being desired is not enough. You must also be respected. Being pursued is not enough. You must also be understood. Being loved in words is not enough. You must also be treated with care. You are not standing before love asking to be accepted at any cost. You are meeting it as an equal. You have standards not because you believe you are superior, but because you finally understand what emotional safety requires. Standards are not a list of impossible demands designed to prevent anyone from reaching you. They are a clear expression of the values necessary for a relationship to remain healthy. Honesty, consistency, accountability, emotional availability, mutual effort, respect for boundaries, the ability to repair after conflict, a willingness to grow. No one will embody these qualities perfectly at every moment. Healthy love still contains misunderstandings, difficult seasons, and human limitations. The difference is what happens after the difficulty. Does the person listen? Do they become curious about your experience? Can they admit when they were wrong? Do their apologies influence their future behavior? Are both of you working toward understanding? Or are you once again doing the emotional labor alone? You do not need perfection. You need participation. You need someone who does not leave you carrying the entire relationship while calling your exhaustion a personal failure. And before asking another person to offer these qualities, continue practicing them with yourself. Be honest with yourself. Remain consistent with the promises you make to your own heart. Take accountability when fear shapes your behavior. Become emotionally available to your own feelings. Respect your boundaries even when loneliness asks you to lower them. Repair the relationship with yourself whenever you act against what you know. The love you offer yourself becomes the standard through which you recognize the love of others. When you no longer abandon yourself, abandonment by another person will still hurt, but it will not destroy your identity. When you know how to comfort yourself, another person's distance will not force you to beg for basic care. When your life contains purpose, community, and self-respect, you will not treat romantic attention as your only source of meaning. You will love from desire rather than desperation. This does not mean you will never be afraid. The first time you care deeply again, old fears may return. You may remember how confidently you once trusted someone who later hurt you. You may wonder whether opening your heart is foolish. Courage is not the absence of this fear. Courage is allowing a new person to be new. It is refusing to make the past your only teacher. The past taught you discernment, but life can also teach you safety. The past taught you that words can be empty, but someone else's consistent actions may teach you that words can be honored. The past taught you that vulnerability can be exploited, but healthy connection may show you that vulnerability can also be protected. Do not let one person's failure convince you that love itself is unsafe. Love did not ask them to deceive you. Love did not require them to ignore your pain. Those were choices made by someone who did not know how or did not choose to love responsibly. You are allowed to want love again. You are allowed to remain single. You are allowed to move slowly. You are allowed to decide that your life is already meaningful, with or without another relationship. There is no correct timetable. Healing is not measured by how quickly you become available to someone new. It is measured by how honestly you live. Do not enter a relationship to prove that you have moved on. Do not avoid love forever to prove that no one can hurt you. Choose from truth. Perhaps love will return through another person. Perhaps for this season, it will return through friendship, creativity, faith, purpose, family, service, and the quiet relationship you are rebuilding with yourself. Whatever form it takes, let it meet the woman you are now. Not the woman who accepts confusion because she fears solitude. Not the woman who mistakes sacrifice for worthiness. Not the woman who disappears to keep someone close. Let love meet a woman who can open the door without removing its hinges. A woman who can welcome connection without surrendering discernment. A woman who can offer tenderness without handing away her identity. A woman who knows that if someone leaves, she will grieve, but she will not leave herself with them. That is the deepest trust walking away can teach you. Not the certainty that no one will ever hurt you again. The certainty that you will never again participate in your own abandonment. There will come a day when you understand that walking away was not the end of your story. It was the end of your willingness to keep repeating the same chapter. You may not recognize that day when it first arrives. There may be no dramatic announcement, no sudden transformation, and no moment when every painful memory disappears. Healing often reveals itself quietly. You wake up and realize you did not dream about them. You hear their name and your body does not tighten. You pass a familiar place and remember what happened without feeling pulled back into it. You stop wondering whether they regret losing you. You no longer need to know whether they have changed, suffered, apologized, or told anyone the truth. Their life becomes theirs again, and yours becomes yours. This is freedom, not the absence of memory, but the end of memory's authority over your present. You once believed freedom would arrive when they finally understood what they did. You thought it would come through an apology, an explanation, or a moment of visible regret. But freedom arrived when their understanding was no longer required. It came when you stopped placing the key to your peace in the hands of someone who had already shown you how carelessly they could hold it. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson walking away teaches. Closure is not always something another person gives you. Sometimes closure is the decision to stop reopening what reality has already finished. You may still have unanswered questions. You may never know whether they truly loved you, why they changed, or whether they understood how deeply their actions affected you. But you no longer need every answer to move forward. You know enough. You know what the relationship required you to sacrifice. You know how often you had to question your own perception to preserve it. You know the difference between being loved and being kept emotionally attached. You know that promises without patterns cannot create safety. You know that your compassion must include you. And you know that love should never require your disappearance. These truths are not small. They are the wisdom you carried out of the fire. Perhaps you would never have chosen to learn them this way. If life had offered a gentler teacher, you would have accepted it. You did not need betrayal, abandonment, or prolonged disappointment to become worthy of wisdom. Do not romanticize the wound. Do not pretend the suffering was beautiful simply because something meaningful eventually grew from it. What happened may have been unnecessary, unfair, and deeply painful. Growth does not excuse the person who harmed you. It only means their choices did not succeed in destroying your ability to become. You are not grateful for the wound. You are grateful that the wound did not have the final word. There is a difference. You can acknowledge what the experience taught you without calling the experience a gift. You can value the woman you became without believing she needed to be broken first. You can create meaning from pain without pretending the pain was meant for you. This is how you reclaim authorship. You did not control what happened, but you can decide what the experience becomes inside your story. It can become the reason you never trust again, or it can become the reason you trust more wisely. It can become the reason you harden your heart, or it can become the reason you protect your tenderness with stronger boundaries. It can become the evidence you use to prove that you are unlovable. Or it can become the moment you finally stop measuring your worth through another person's inability to love you well. The choice will not be made once. It will be made in hundreds of ordinary moments. When someone ignores your boundary, will you speak? When loneliness returns, will you reach backward or remain beside yourself? When a new person offers affection, will you abandon discernment or allow trust to grow slowly? When your intuition whispers, will you listen? When you make a mistake, will you learn from it or use it to continue punishing yourself? These choices form the life waiting on the other side of goodbye. Walking away was only the doorway. Now you must decide how you will live after passing through it. You may have spent so much energy escaping the old life that you have not yet imagined the new one. Do not be afraid of that uncertainty. You do not need a complete map. You only need a direction. Move toward what allows you to remain whole. Move toward people who do not punish honesty. Move toward work that restores your sense of purpose. Move toward friendships where care travels in both directions. Move toward rooms where your voice does not have to shrink. Move toward decisions that create peace after the excitement has passed. And whenever possible, move toward yourself. There may still be setbacks. Healing does not make you immune to nostalgia. A lonely evening may cause you to remember only the beautiful moments. An anniversary may reopen grief you believed had ended. A new disappointment may awaken the fear that everyone eventually leaves. When this happens, do not accuse yourself of returning to the beginning. You are not at the beginning. You are meeting an old feeling with new awareness. The difference may not be that the feeling never returns. The difference is that you no longer let it make every decision. You can miss someone and remain gone. You can feel afraid and still protect your boundary. You can remember the love and remain honest about the harm. You can have a difficult day without turning it into a permanent conclusion about your life. Healing is not emotional perfection. It is the growing ability to remain faithful to yourself while emotions change. There may also be moments when you are tempted to prove how well you are doing. You want the person who hurt you to see your happiness. You want them to witness what they lost and recognize that your value continued after their departure. But your life is not a message addressed to them. Your success is not revenge. Your beauty is not an argument. Your peace does not need an audience. Let your healing become private enough to be sincere. Build a life that would still be meaningful if they never saw it. Laugh without wondering whether the sound will reach them. Achieve without imagining their reaction. Love again if you choose, without making the new relationship a performance for the old one. Your future deserves to be more than a response to your past. For a while, pain may have been your greatest source of motivation. It gave you energy to leave, rebuild, and prove that you could survive. But eventually, you must learn to live for something more than proving the wound did not defeat you. Survival was necessary. Now let joy become possible. Joy may feel vulnerable because pain taught you to expect that beautiful things will be taken away. You may hesitate to celebrate, relax, or trust a peaceful season. You may believe that if you remain prepared for disappointment, disappointment will hurt less. But constant preparation for loss is another way of losing the present. You do not protect happiness by refusing to experience it. Let good moments be good without demanding guarantees. Let safe people care for you without searching for hidden danger in every gesture. Let your body rest without believing that rest will make you unprepared. Let life surprise you with tenderness. You are allowed to enjoy what exists now, even though nothing human lasts forever. This is not naivete. It is courage after knowledge. Before the wound, you may have trusted because you did not understand what betrayal could cost. After healing, you can trust because you know that even if life changes, you will remain beside yourself. That is a deeper security. You no longer need another person to promise that they will never leave in order to believe you will survive. You need to know that whatever happens, you will not surrender your dignity to prevent it. You will not chase love that has become unwilling. You will not beg someone to recognize what they have repeatedly chosen to ignore. You will not keep negotiating with disrespect because you are afraid of an empty chair. You have sat beside emptiness before. You discover that an empty chair is less lonely than the presence of someone who makes you feel invisible. This knowledge changes what you are willing to accept, but let it also change what you are willing to receive. Do not become so practiced at protecting yourself that you reject everything gentle. Do not treat kindness as suspicious simply because cruelty once wore a beautiful face. Observe, move slowly, keep your boundaries, but leave a window open for goodness. Not everyone will ask you to become smaller. Not everyone will use your vulnerability against you. Not everyone will confuse your patience with permission. There are people who know how to remain present during difficult conversations. There are people whose apologies contain responsibility. There are people who will celebrate your strength without exploiting it and honor your softness without attempting to control it. You do not have to search desperately for them. Build a truthful life and become available to truthful connection. The right relationships will not require you to betray the person you work so hard to reclaim. And if romantic love does not arrive soon or does not arrive at all, your life can still be full. This may be another belief you need to release. The idea that a woman's story becomes complete only when someone chooses to stay beside her. Your life contains meaning beyond partnership. There are gifts only you can develop. There are people who will be strengthened by your presence. There are places you have not seen, ideas you have not explored, and versions of peace you have not yet experienced. You are not an unfinished sentence waiting for another person to provide the final words. You are already a complete life. Love may accompany that life, but it does not create its value. Perhaps you spent years trying to be chosen. Now choose what chooses your well-being. Choose sleep over another midnight argument. Choose truth over a comforting illusion. Choose distance over repeated disrespect. Choose temporary loneliness over permanent self-abandonment. Choose the quiet beginning whose outcome you cannot yet see. Choose yourself not because you believe you are the only person who matters, but because you finally understand that you matter too. This is not selfishness. Selfishness ignores the humanity of others. Self-respect refuses to ignore your own. You can remain generous without giving people permission to empty you. You can be forgiven without making yourself repeatedly available for injury. You can understand someone's pain without accepting their pain as justification for the harm they cause. You can love with your whole heart while refusing to build your home inside another person's uncertainty. This balance is maturity. It is neither a hardened heart nor an unguarded one. It is a heart with a door that can open, a door that can close, a door whose owner decides who may enter and what behavior allows them to remain. For too long, perhaps you believed love meant leaving that door unlocked. Now you know that sacred things deserve protection. Your peace is sacred. Your time is sacred. Your body is sacred. Your trust is sacred. Your future is sacred. Access to these things must be supported by care. One day, you may look back on the moment you walked away and feel tenderness for the woman who made that decision. You will remember how frightened she was. You will remember how badly she wanted the relationship to become what she had imagined. You will remember that she left before she felt ready, because something inside her finally understood that readiness might never come. She did not know what waited beyond the door. She only knew she could no longer remain where she was. Thank her. Thank the woman who walked with trembling legs. Thank the woman who cried after choosing herself. Thank the woman who resisted the message she wanted to send. Thank the woman who survived the nights when loneliness tried to rewrite the truth. Thank the woman who built a boundary while still grieving the person outside it. She may not have felt powerful, but she performed one of the most powerful acts of her life. She interrupted the pattern. Because of her, the next chapter did not have to repeat the last one. Because of her, the women who watch you may learn that endurance is not the only form of strength. Because of her, perhaps your daughters, friends, sisters, or even strangers will see that leaving what repeatedly diminishes you is not failure. It is a return to truth. The lesson was never simply that you were strong enough to walk away. The deeper lesson was that you were worthy of the life walking away made possible. A life where your nervous system is not constantly preparing for pain. A life where love does not have to be decoded. A life where you can express a need without fearing abandonment. A life where peace is no longer mistaken for emptiness. A life where you do not have to earn tenderness by suffering first. This life may take time to build. There will be days when progress feels invisible. Continue anyway. Every boundary is a brick. Every honest decision is a brick. Every night you refuse to return to familiar pain is a brick. Every act of self-forgiveness is a brick. Every dream you reclaim is a brick. One day, you will look around and realize you have built a home within yourself, not a fortress that keeps everyone outside. A home, warm, peaceful, truthful, and protected. People may enter, but no one will own it. People may leave, but they cannot take it with them. This is what you were building every time you chose yourself. You were not becoming cold. You were becoming rooted. You were not giving up on love. You were refusing to keep calling suffering by its name. You were not abandoning the relationship. You were ending the abandonment of yourself. And perhaps you are listening now while standing near your own difficult door. Perhaps you already know what must end, but you are waiting to feel completely fearless. You may never feel completely fearless. Courage rarely arrives without grief. Sometimes courage is simply the moment your loyalty to yourself becomes stronger than your fear of losing someone else. You do not have to hate them to leave. You do not have to stop caring. You do not need to erase every memory or deny that beautiful moments existed. You only need to tell the truth about what staying is doing to you. Then take the next honest step. Perhaps that step is speaking clearly. Perhaps it is seeking support. Perhaps it is making a practical plan. Perhaps it is ending contact. Perhaps it is refusing one more opportunity to repeat the same wound. Whatever the step is, let it be guided by wisdom rather than pressure. If your situation involves threats, violence, coercion, or danger, Seek qualified local support and prioritize your safety. Strength does not mean facing danger alone. For everyone else, standing at an emotional threshold, remember this. You do not need to see the entire road before leaving the place where your spirit can no longer breathe. The road will reveal itself as you walk. At first, you may carry grief, then clarity, then boundaries, then self-trust, then, slowly, peace. And one morning, you will notice that the life you were afraid to begin has become the life you are grateful you did not miss. You will understand why some lessons could not reach you while you were still holding on. You had to put down the relationship to pick up your own life. You had to release the future you imagined to meet the future that was still possible. You had to stop begging someone else to choose you so that you could finally hear yourself say, I choose me. Not once, not dramatically, but every day, in the way you speak to yourself, in the behavior you accept, in the people you trust, in the doors you close, in the life you build after closing them. There are lessons that only come when you are strong enough to walk away. And perhaps the most beautiful lesson is this. You were not walking away from love. You were walking toward a love that no longer required you to disappear. You were walking toward dignity, toward truth, toward peace, toward the woman you were always meant to become. And this time, when you find her, stay.